The Galactic Council had grown comfortable in their authority. For millennia, they had ruled the known universe, their ancient wisdom accepted without question, their power unchallenged, their dominance absolute. They had seen species rise and fall, had guided civilizations toward enlightenment, and had maintained order through the careful application of their authority. The galaxy was peaceful, prosperous, and predictable, but the Council had also grown complacent. They had become so accustomed to their power that they had forgotten the lessons of history, had assumed that their authority was eternal, had believed that no force could challenge their dominance. They had dismissed threats, ignored warnings, and refused to acknowledge that the galaxy was changing around them. The first indication that something was wrong came from the outer reaches of the galaxy, where a new power was emerging. The Xylos, whose collective consciousness could perceive patterns across vast distances, detected unusual energy signatures in a region that had been considered empty. The Corvoth, whose mathematical models could predict future developments, calculated that something unprecedented was occurring. The Valthorians, whose crystalline bodies could sense disturbances in the fabric of reality, felt a tremor in the cosmic order. The Council sent scouts to investigate, expecting to find a natural phenomenon or perhaps the remnants of a long-dead civilization. Instead, they found something that made even the ancient beings pause. The region was teeming with activity, thousands of ships moving with purpose, millions of beings working toward a common goal. It was a civilization, a vast and powerful civilization, that had been hiding in plain sight. The scouts reported their findings with disbelief. The civilization was human in origin, its people descendants of the species that had been dismissed millennia ago. But these humans were not the primitive beings that the Council had rejected. They had developed technologies that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen, had built a military force that dwarfed the Council's fleets, and had created a society that was the envy of every species that learned of it. The Council convened an emergency session, their chamber filled with tension and fear. They had been wrong about humanity, had dismissed them as irrelevant, had assumed they were extinct or insignificant. Now they were confronted with the reality of human achievement, a reality that challenged everything they believed about themselves and their place in the universe. The human civilization was called the Terran Dominion, a name that carried the weight of their history and their ambition. They had expanded across thousands of worlds, their population numbering in the trillions. Their technology was advanced beyond measure, their military capability unprecedented, their culture rich and diverse. They had achieved everything that the Council had denied they could achieve, and they had done it without any assistance. The Council's leaders debated how to respond to this revelation. Some advocated for engagement, suggesting that the Council should reach out to humanity and establish a relationship. Others argued for containment, believing that humanity's power was a threat that needed to be controlled. A minority, growing in influence, suggested that the Council should simply accept humanity's superiority, acknowledging that they had been surpassed by a species they had dismissed. The humans, for their part, had been watching the Council's response with interest. They had known that their existence would eventually be discovered, had prepared for the moment when they would reveal themselves to the galaxy. They had waited for the right time, the perfect moment to demonstrate their strength and secure their place in the galactic order. That moment came when a rogue faction of the Council, calling themselves the Purists, attempted to attack the Terran Dominion. The Purists believed that humanity's power was an abomination, a violation of the natural order, a threat that needed to be eliminated. They gathered a fleet of their own, assembled allies who shared their beliefs, and launched a surprise attack on a human colony. The attack was devastating. The human colony reduced to rubble, its population slaughtered. The Purists celebrated their victory, believing that they had struck a blow against the human threat. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had attacked humanity, had killed human civilians, had declared war on a species that had been preparing for this moment for centuries. The Terran Dominion responded with overwhelming force. Their fleet, the largest and most powerful ever assembled, moved into the galaxy with terrifying speed. The ships were massive, their weapons devastating, their crews determined. They had waited for this moment, had prepared for this confrontation, and would not be denied their victory. The Purists, who had expected a quick and easy victory, were shocked by the scale of the human response. They had assumed that humanity was weak, that their power was exaggerated, that they could be defeated with minimal effort. They were wrong. The human fleet destroyed the purest forces with brutal efficiency, their weapons finding their marks, their tactics overwhelming the enemy. The Council watched in horror as the human fleet continued its advance, destroying any purest forces they encountered, liberating worlds that had been conquered by the rogue faction. They realized that humanity was not just powerful but unstoppable, their military capability far exceeding anything the Council could muster. The day that humanity revealed its true military strength, the galaxy fell silent. Every species, every civilization, every being who witnessed the display was stunned into silence. They had never seen anything like it, had never imagined that such power could exist, had never considered that the species they had dismissed could achieve such dominance. The human fleet gathered above the Council's homeworld, their ships filling the sky, their presence a constant reminder of human power. The Council members, the ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia, looked up at the human ships with a mixture of fear and awe. They had been humbled, their power challenged, their authority undermined. Admiral Marcus Webb, the commander of the human fleet, hailed the Council. His face appeared on their screens, his expression calm and professional. He spoke of the attack on the human colony, of the purists who had committed the atrocity, of the response that had been necessary. He made it clear that humanity had not sought this conflict, had not desired this confrontation, but would not hesitate to defend themselves against any threat. The Council listened in silence, their ancient minds struggling to process what was happening. They had never been challenged like this, had never faced a power that could rival their own, had never been forced to acknowledge their own limitations. They realized that the galaxy had changed, that the old order was gone, that a new power had emerged. The Terran Dominion had revealed its true military strength, and the galaxy had fallen silent. The humans had shown that they were not just a species to be respected but a force to be feared. They had proven that their power was real, their capability unmatched, their determination absolute. The Council, humbled by the display, offered their surrender. They acknowledged that they had been wrong about humanity, admitted that their assumptions had been flawed, and accepted that the Terran Dominion was now the dominant power in the galaxy. They asked for mercy, for forgiveness, for a chance to build a new relationship. Admiral Webb accepted their surrender, his expression showing neither triumph nor contempt. He understood that the Council had been wrong, but he also understood that vengeance was not the answer, that destruction was not the goal, that cooperation was the path forward. He offered the Council a partnership, a chance to work together to build a better future. The galaxy, which had expected silence from humanity, had received thunder. The day humanity revealed its true military strength, the galaxy fell silent, and nothing would ever be the same. The silence that followed humanity's display of military strength was deafening. Every species, every civilization, every being who had witnessed the demonstration was stunned into submission. The old order had crumbled, the Council's authority had been challenged, and a new power had emerged to shape the future of the galaxy. The Council, humbled by their defeat, had accepted humanity's offer of partnership. They had acknowledged their error, admitted their arrogance, and agreed to work with the Terran Dominion to build a better future. But the transition was not easy, the ancient beings struggling to adapt to their new position, their pride wounded, their authority diminished. The human fleet had withdrawn from the Council's homeworld, but their presence lingered, a constant reminder of what had been achieved. The ships had returned to their bases, their crews recovering from the battle, their commanders planning for the future. They had proven their capability, but they knew that the real work was just beginning. Admiral Marcus Webb, the commander of the human fleet, had become the most powerful being in the galaxy. His decisions would shape the future of galactic civilization. His wisdom would guide the new order. His compassion would determine the fate of countless species. He understood the weight of his responsibility, the burden of his power, and the importance of his choices. The purists, the rogue faction that had attacked the human colony, had been destroyed. Their leaders were dead, their forces scattered, their ideology discredited. The attack that had been meant to weaken humanity had instead revealed their true strength, had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, had secured their dominance. But the purist's attack had also revealed something else, the depth of resentment that existed in the galaxy. There were species that feared humanity, that resented their power, that plotted against them. The purists had been only the first, their attack a harbinger of what was to come. The galaxy was not united in its acceptance of human dominance. There were forces that would resist, that would challenge, that would fight. Admiral Webb was aware of these forces, his intelligence networks tracking their activities, his strategists planning for their eventual confrontation. He understood that the galaxy was not yet at peace, that the old order was not yet gone, that the future was not yet secure. He would need to be vigilant, to prepare for whatever came next, to ensure that humanity's position was maintained. The humans of the Terran Dominion, meanwhile, were adjusting to their new role. They had been hidden for so long, their existence secret, their power concealed. Now they were revealed, their strength known, their position secure. They had achieved what their ancestors had dreamed of, had avenged the wrongs that had been done to them, had secured their place in the galactic order. But they also understood that power brought responsibility, that dominance demanded compassion, that strength required wisdom. They would not repeat the mistakes of the Council, would not become the oppressors they had overthrown, would not allow their power to corrupt their values. They would build a better future, not just for themselves, but for all species. The Council, struggling to adapt to their new position, began to change. The ancient beings who had ruled for millennia understood that they needed to evolve, to embrace new ideas, to accept new partners. They reached out to humanity, seeking to learn from them, to understand their culture, to build a relationship based on mutual respect. The Valthorians, whose crystalline forms had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, were the first to embrace the new order. They offered their knowledge, their resources, their wisdom, hoping to build a partnership that would benefit both species. They had learned from their error, understood that their assumptions had been flawed, and were determined to make amends. The Xylos, whose collective consciousness could perceive patterns across vast distances, also embraced the new order. They analyzed humanity's culture, studied their achievements, and found them worthy of respect. They offered their unique perception, their ability to sense disturbances in the fabric of reality, hoping to contribute to the new partnership. The Corvith, whose mathematical models had dismissed humanity as irrelevant, now recalculated their predictions. They had been wrong, their models flawed, their assumptions incorrect. They offered their analytical abilities, their strategic insights, their vast knowledge, hoping to be part of the new order. The galaxy began to heal, its old wounds slowly closing, its new partnerships forming. The Terran Dominion had revealed its true military strength, and the galaxy had fallen silent. But the silence was not the silence of fear or submission. It was the silence of awe, the silence of respect, the silence of hope. Admiral Webb, observing the transformation, felt a sense of satisfaction. He had led his people through the greatest challenge in their history, had achieved the victory they had dreamed of, had secured their place in the galaxy. But he also understood that the work was not finished, that the future was uncertain, that challenges lay ahead. He addressed the galaxy, his words broadcast to beings across the known universe. He spoke of the new order, the partnership that was being built, the hope that was being shared. He spoke of the lessons that had been learned, the mistakes that had been made, the future that could be achieved. The galaxy listened, their attention focused on the human leader. They had seen his power, had witnessed his strength, and now they heard his words. They understood that the humans were not just powerful but wise, not just dominant but compassionate, not just conquerors but builders. The day humanity revealed its true military strength, the galaxy fell silent. And from that silence, something new was born, something that would change the galaxy forever. The new order that emerged from humanity's display of military strength was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The old hierarchies had crumbled, replaced by networks of cooperation and mutual respect. The Council, once the undisputed authority, had become part of a larger community, their wisdom valued but not absolute. And humanity, once dismissed, had become the architects of a new era. The Terran Dominion, the human civilization that had hidden in the shadows for so long, had emerged as the dominant power in the galaxy. But they were not tyrants, not oppressors, not conquerors. They were builders, creators, partners. They had learned from their own history, understood the dangers of unchecked power, and were determined to use their strength for the benefit of all. Admiral Marcus Webb had become the leader of the New Order, his wisdom and compassion earning him the respect of beings across the galaxy. He had led his people through their greatest challenge, had secured their place in the galaxy, and was now guiding them toward a future of cooperation and prosperity. But the transition was not without challenges. There were those who resented humanity's power, who saw them as a threat, who plotted against them. The purists had been destroyed, but their ideology lived on in the hearts of those who could not accept the new order. These forces gathered in the shadows, planning their resistance, waiting for the moment to strike. The Council, transformed by their partnership with humanity, worked to address these challenges. They used their influence to promote the new order, their wisdom to guide the transition, their resources to support the partnership. They had learned from their error, understood that cooperation was more valuable than control, and were determined to make amends. The human fleet, still formidable despite the years of peace, was ready to respond to any threat. They had proven their capability, had shown their strength, and would not hesitate to defend the new order. But they also understood that force was not always the answer, that diplomacy could achieve what war could not, that understanding was more powerful than violence. The resistance forces, sensing the strength of the new order, hesitated to act. They had seen what humanity was capable of, had witnessed the destruction of the purists, and were not eager to share their fate. They waited, planning, preparing, but never acting. The fear of human power was enough to keep them in check. But fear was not the foundation of a lasting peace. The humans understood this, knew that true stability required more than intimidation, that lasting cooperation required trust, and that building trust required effort. Admiral Webb reached out to the resistance forces, offering them a chance to join the new order, to be part of the partnership, to share in the prosperity. He did not threaten, did not demand, did not coerce. He simply offered, his words carrying the weight of his sincerity, his compassion, his hope. Some of the resistance forces accepted his offer, their resentment fading as they understood the true nature of humanity's intentions. They had expected to be punished, to be destroyed, to be enslaved. Instead, they were offered partnership, respect, and hope. They embraced the new order, becoming some of its strongest advocates. Others refused, their hatred too deep, their resentment too strong. They continued to plot, to plan, to prepare. But their numbers were small, their influence limited, their impact negligible. The new order was too strong, its foundation too solid, its future too bright. The galaxy continued to transform, its old wounds healing, its new partnerships forming. The humans had revealed their true military strength, and the galaxy had fallen silent. But the silence was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of respect, the silence of awe, the silence of hope. Admiral Webb looked out at the galaxy from his command center, his thoughts turning to the future. He had achieved what his ancestors had dreamed of, had secured his people's place in the galaxy, had built a new order from the ashes of the old. But he also understood that the work was not finished, that the future was uncertain, that challenges lay ahead. He thought about the resistance forces that refused to accept the new order, about the threats that still existed, about the challenges that would come. He knew that the galaxy was not yet at peace, that the new order was not yet secure, that the future was not yet guaranteed. But he also knew that humanity was ready for whatever came next. They had proven their strength, had shown their capability, and were determined to build a better future. They would face the challenges, overcome the obstacles, and ensure that the new order endured. The galaxy had fallen silent on the day humanity revealed its true military strength. But that silence was not an ending, it was a beginning. It was the silence of a new era, the silence of hope, the silence of a future being born. The years that followed humanity's revelation of military strength were a time of unprecedented change. The galaxy, once divided by hierarchy and conflict, had become a place of cooperation and mutual respect. The new order, built on the foundation of human power, had brought peace and prosperity to countless worlds. The Terran Dominion had become the heart of this new order, their technology, culture, and values shaping the future of galactic civilization. They had not sought to impose their will, had not desired to dominate others, had not intended to become tyrants. They had simply offered their partnership, their cooperation, their friendship. And the galaxy had accepted. Admiral Marcus Webb, now retired from active command, served as an advisor to the new leadership. His wisdom was sought by beings across the galaxy, his experience valued by all who understood the importance of learning from the past. He had led his people through their greatest challenge, had secured their place in the galaxy, and was now guiding them toward a future of peace and prosperity. But the galaxy was not without its challenges. The resistance forces that had refused to accept the new order had grown bolder, their attacks more frequent, their violence more destructive. They had found allies among those who resented humanity's power, who feared their influence, who plotted their destruction. The Council, transformed by their partnership with humanity, worked to address these challenges. They used their influence to promote peace, their wisdom to guide the transition, their resources to support the new order. They had learned from their error, understood that cooperation was more valuable than control, and were determined to protect the future they had built. The human fleet, still the most powerful in the galaxy, responded to the resistance attacks with measured force. They did not seek to destroy the resistance, did not desire to exterminate their enemies, did not wish to escalate the conflict. They simply defended themselves, protected their allies, and maintained the peace. The resistance forces, frustrated by their inability to achieve victory, became more desperate. They launched increasingly bold attacks, targeting civilian populations, destroying infrastructure, and killing innocents. Their violence was indiscriminate, their cruelty shocking, their purpose unclear. Admiral Webb, observing the escalation, understood that a new approach was needed. Force alone could not defeat the resistance. It only fueled their hatred, strengthened their resolve, and justified their violence. He needed to find another way, a path to peace that did not require more bloodshed. He reached out to the resistance leaders, offering them a chance to negotiate, to find common ground, to end the conflict. He did not threaten, did not demand, did not coerce. He simply offered, his words carrying the weight of his sincerity, his compassion, his hope. The resistance leaders, surprised by the offer, agreed to meet. They had expected to be hunted, to be destroyed, to be eliminated. Instead, they were offered a chance to talk, to negotiate, to find a way forward. They came to the meeting with suspicion, but they also came with hope. The negotiations were difficult, the positions of the two sides far apart. The resistance demanded the withdrawal of human forces from certain worlds, the recognition of their grievances, the acknowledgement of their rights. The humans offered partnership, cooperation, and respect, but they would not abandon their allies, would not surrender their principles, would not compromise their values. Admiral Webb, patient and persistent, worked to find common ground. He understood that the resistance's grievances were not entirely without merit, that their fears were not entirely unfounded, that their concerns deserved to be addressed. He offered concessions, compromises, and reassurances, hoping to build a foundation for peace. The resistance leaders, moved by his sincerity, began to soften. They had expected arrogance and contempt, had anticipated demands and threats. Instead, they found understanding and compassion, a willingness to listen, a commitment to find a way forward. The negotiations continued for months, the two sides slowly building trust, finding common ground, and creating a framework for peace. The resistance agreed to end their attacks, to participate in the new order, to work toward a better future. The humans agreed to address their grievances, to respect their rights, to include them in the partnership. The galaxy watched the negotiations with hope, their fears slowly fading, their trust gradually building. They had seen humanity's power, had witnessed their strength, and now they were seeing their compassion, their wisdom, their commitment to peace. The day the peace agreement was signed, the galaxy celebrated. Beings from across the known universe rejoiced, their hopes fulfilled, their fears dispelled, their future secured. The conflict that had threatened to tear the galaxy apart had been resolved. The wounds that had been inflicted were beginning to heal. The partnership that had been built was growing stronger. Admiral Webb, standing at the signing ceremony, felt a sense of satisfaction. He had achieved what he had set out to do, had secured his people's place in the galaxy, had built a new order from the ashes of the old. He had faced the challenges, overcome the obstacles, and ensured that the future would be bright. The galaxy had fallen silent on the day humanity revealed its true military strength. But that silence had given way to something new, something better, something that would endure forever. The galaxy had been transformed, its old hierarchies gone, its new order secure. And humanity, the species that had been dismissed, was at the heart of it all. The final chapter of humanity's revelation of military strength was not about power or dominance, but about legacy and hope. The galaxy had been transformed, its old hierarchies replaced by partnerships, its ancient conflicts resolved through cooperation, its future secured through unity. The humans had revealed their true strength, and the galaxy had fallen silent. But that silence had given way to something new. The Terran Dominion, which had hidden in the shadows for so long, had become the heart of galactic civilization. Their technology, culture, and values had shaped the new order, their wisdom and compassion guiding beings across the known universe. They had not sought to dominate, had not desired to oppress, had not intended to become tyrants. They had simply offered their partnership, their cooperation, their friendship. And the galaxy had accepted. Admiral Marcus Webb, now an elder in his people's community, looked back on his life with satisfaction. He had led his people through their greatest challenge, had secured their place in the galaxy, and had built a new order from the ashes of the old. He had faced the challenges, overcome the obstacles, and ensured that the future would be bright. The Council, transformed by their partnership with humanity, had become the guardians of the new order. Their ancient wisdom, once used to maintain their dominance, was now used to promote peace, cooperation, and understanding. They had learned from their error, understood that partnership was more valuable than control, and were determined to protect the future they had built. The resistance forces that had once fought against humanity had become part of the new order. Their grievances had been addressed, their rights respected, their voices heard. They had found a place in the galaxy, a purpose in the partnership, a hope in the future. The galaxy was at peace, its conflicts resolved, its wounds healing. Beings from different species worked together, shared resources, and built a better future. The old divisions had been overcome, the new partnerships flourishing. But the memory of the day humanity revealed its true military strength was never forgotten. It was a reminder of what had been achieved, a testament to human capability, a symbol of the power of determination. It was told to children across the galaxy, a story of hope and resilience, a lesson in the importance of never underestimating those who have been dismissed. The humans of the Terran Dominion continued to build, to create, to shape their future. They had achieved greatness, had proven their worth, had secured their place in the galaxy. But they also understood that greatness was not an end but a beginning, that achievement was not a destination but a journey, that power was not a possession but a responsibility. Admiral Webb, in his final public address, spoke to the galaxy about the lessons that had been learned. He spoke about the importance of humility, of understanding that no species had a monopoly on wisdom. He spoke about the importance of compassion, of recognizing that every being deserved respect. He spoke about the importance of cooperation, of understanding that the future would be built together. The galaxy listened, their attention focused on the human elder. They had seen his power, had witnessed his wisdom, and now they heard his final words. They understood that the humans were not just powerful but wise, not just dominant but compassionate, not just conquerors but builders. The day humanity revealed its true military strength, the galaxy fell silent. But from that silence, something new was born, something that would endure forever. The galaxy had been transformed, its old hierarchies gone, its new order secure. And humanity, the species that had been dismissed, was at the heart of it all. As Admiral Webb looked out at the stars for the final time, he felt a sense of peace. He had achieved what he had set out to do, had secured his people's place in the galaxy, had built a new order from the ashes of the old. He had faced the challenges, overcome the obstacles, and ensured that the future would be bright. The galaxy was at peace, its future secure, its hope renewed. The old hierarchies were gone, replaced by partnerships and cooperation. The ancient conflicts had been resolved, the wounds healed, the divisions overcome. And humanity, the species that had been dismissed, had become the architects of this new order. The story of humanity's revelation would be told for generations, a legend that inspired beings across the galaxy. It was a story of determination and resilience, of strength and compassion, of power and wisdom. It was a story that gave hope to those who had been dismissed, that reminded everyone that greatness could come from unexpected places, that showed that the future could be built from the ashes of the past. The galaxy had fallen silent on the day humanity revealed its true military strength. But that silence was not an ending, it was a beginning. It was the silence of a new era, the silence of hope, the silence of a future being born. And from that silence, something beautiful had emerged, something that would endure forever.